Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and in Yirtz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Pei Tes Amid Beis, and I hope we will be concluding the fascinating Siman Shin Beis. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanasuna Batzara Ba'Shivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayom Bein Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yetziim Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'Efel L'Oira U'Mishibed L'Geula Hashla Bagalo B'Zman Kariv. V'neimar Amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema from Mishnah Ben Esther Fadl Tzvi Ben Leah Miriam Chavadasa Pasriel Serel Devorah Bashasha Bina Rivka Bashira Leah and Yitzchak Ben Tzion Ben Dusha. The Rebbeinu Shalom, our learning should also be a schus. The Rebbeinu Shalom should look out and protect all of our brothers and sisters that find themselves in harm's way. So we continue to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the top line of Pei Tes Amid Beis. At the end of the line, Siman Shin Beis Sif Yud Aleph. Says the Mechaber, Mi shenislach lecha yadai betit. If somebody's hands get very muddy, mekancha, he can wipe them biznav hasus, on a horse's tail, ubiznav hapara, or on a cow's tail, uvamapa hakosha, or on a very stiff, hard type of towel, ha'asuya le'echois ba'kaitzim, that was typically used for grabbing hold of thorns, of a bush that was thorny. So this sounds like some kind of a towel that was used almost as a glove when somebody was doing gardening and he had to grab hold of a thorn bush. He would have this thick, stiff piece of fabric that he would use. So he can wipe his muddy hands on all of these very fascinating things: a horse's tail, a cow's tail, this type of glove, but not on a typical hand towel. The reason for this is we don't want him to wipe his muddy hands in the typical way that he would do during the week. Why? Because the reality that the Mechaber is addressing is that back in the day, in his times, it was typical that if your hands got muddy, there was a towel that you would use. You would wipe your hands off on that towel, and then right away, you would go to wash that towel out because you didn't want it to get ruined. And therefore, it says the Mechaber, if we're going to allow you to wipe your muddy hands in the way that you typically do it during the week, there was a real risk that you might come to kibbutz. You might go ahead, wipe your hands, and right away throw it into the wash basin and come to perform malabain, and therefore the Mechaber says it was aser. Now, before we even go to the Mishnah Berurah, I want to go to a biur halacha, because some of you might be wondering right away. The opening shot, so to speak, of the Mechaber was that you could wipe your hands in a very unusual way. You could wipe your hands on a horse's tail or on a cow's tail. Now, the obvious problem with that is that Balei Chayim are muktzah. Animals are muktzah. You're not allowed to be mishtamish with a Baal Chai. You're not allowed to make any use of a live animal on Shabbos because a Baal Chai is muktzah. So how exactly are you going to wipe your hands on the tail of a horse or on the tail of a cow? So if you take a look in the biur halacha, Dibra Maskel Mekancha Biznav Hasus, the Chavetz Chaim tackles this problem. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Kosa B'Sefer Tosefes Shabbos, the Sefer Tosefes Shabbos writes, Dahainu she'enam mechubarin ba'behema. The Tosefes Shabbos dealt with this issue, and he said the Mechaber must be speaking about a case where you have a horse's tail or a cow's tail that has been detached from the animal. Truth is, if you take a look at most shoe brushes, hat brushes, a lot of them are made out of horsehair. So you have a tail. Somebody cut off the tail of a horse and they use it as something to wipe their hands on. So now it's not being mishtamish with a Baal Chai because it's detached. Dem loikein, because if not, says the Tosefes Shabbos, ad kan devarav. The Tosefes Shabbos writes our problem. If we're talking about a live animal and the tail is still attached to the animal, you're not allowed to be metaltal a Baal Chai. Baal Chai is muktzah. Ad kan devarav. Says the Chavetz Chaim, though, Chavetz Chaim says we have to look into this because this is difficult. Says the Chavetz Chaim, you have a mechaber that says that you could wipe your hands on the tail of a horse, on the tail of a cow, and there isn't one pirush on the mechaber, there isn't one paisik that jumps up and says, hold it a minute, the mechaber must be talking about where it's detached from the animal. No paisik says such a thing. And the truth is, the mechaber is taking this from a tesefta, and the language of the tesefta doesn't seem to apply that way. So, in the end, what the Bir Halacha says, if you skip down about a line and a half, he says, this that the Tosefes Shabbos had a problem. How could you wipe your hand on the tail of a live animal? It's muktzah. Efsher delay asru rak gufan de balachayim. Chavetz Chaim puts forth the possibility that this din derabanan, remember, muktzah is a derabanan. This din derabanan that you're not allowed to be metaltal balchai is only the body of the balchai. V'loy b'sa'aron shehu mechuber lehen, but not hair that's attached to the animal but hangs off of the animal, or the tail. The loy choshev kegufan bazeh. This is not considered part of the animal's body. This is something that's hanging off the animal's body, and maybe there is no iser muktzah on the tail. Chavetz Chaim concludes, v'tzarich, this is a matter that requires further research, further iyun. Okay, now we can go to the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut nun zayin. Uvamapa kosher. You could use the stiff, hard towel that was used to grab hold of thorns. V'chein besmartut, and this is very pertinent to us. V'chein besmartut she'ein makbid alav im yislach lech. Or, if you have a rag, you have a shmata, and it's a shmata that you don't mind if it's dirty. So in that case, there really is no reason that you should have to be chayshish, that you're going to run and launder it right away. Or maybe you could wipe it against a wall, like we learned earlier. We learned earlier that somebody's shoe is muddy, or somebody's foot is muddy. He could be mekanech b'kaisel. He could wipe it off against a wall. I believe the poskim say that negel in yanenu, to our times, if your hand is dirty and you wipe it off on a towel, the truth is, we're not makbid. When a towel gets dirty, we throw it in the laundry. We don't take a towel when it's dirty and run right away to throw it into the washing machine, or to run right away and throw it into a basin to soak. There doesn't seem to be much room for a chash over here that we're going to run right away and go perform malabin. Okay, moving along to Sif Yud Beis, 3 lines down, end of the line, says the Mechaber. Very interesting. Also, l'nagev kois shahaya by mayim ayayin b'mapa. Mechaber says over here a halacha. You're not allowed to take a towel and use it to wipe out the inside of a kois, a cup, that had either mayim, water, or wine. So you have a cup. Kois over here doesn't necessarily mean a kiddush kois. It means a cup, a glass. You have a glass, and the glass is wet on the inside from water or wine. Says the Mechaber, you cannot go take a towel and wipe it out. Why, says the Mechaber? Mishum da'asi l'dei schita, because we're afraid that by doing so, you're going to come to perform the malacha of schita. Schita, wringing out something that's wet, squeezing out a towel that's wet. So, again, what's the Mechaber saying? You have a kais. The Mechaber specifies that the kais was wet from water or wine. Says the Mechaber, you can't go wipe out the kais because we're afraid that you're going to come to schita. Okay? Says the Mishnah Berurah Katnun Ches. O yayin. The Mechaber specified water and wine. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ayin b'Magen Avram. Take a look at the Magen Avram. Shakosav, and the Magen Avram has 2 ways to understand this Mechaber. Ayin b'Magen Avram. Take a look at the Magen Avram Shakosav, who writes, the b'sha'ar mashkin. The Mechaber specifies water or wine. How about Pepsi? How about orange juice? Says the Magen Avram, the b'shar mashkin, other liquids, other beverages, other than water or wine, mutter l'nagev es hakos. It would be mutter to wipe out the kais. Ve'ein chosheshin shebeyavar l'schita, and we're not concerned that you might come to schita. So okay, right away over here, this is tzarich bir. We need to understand this. So the Mechaber says you can't wipe out the kais because we're afraid you might come to schita. Says the Magen Avraham, this iser only applies to a kais that was wet from water or wine, which definitely sounds that way from the Mechaber, and it's only by these liquids that we're afraid you're going to come to schita, not by other liquids. Why? Why would that be? And exactly what is the concern over here? So it seems that the concern over here was that water or wine, and it seems that we're talking specifically about white wine, water or white wine, there was a fear that those liquids actually could clean the towel that you're going ahead and you're wiping out the kais with. And therefore the fear is you're going to go ahead, you're going to take the towel, you're going to wipe out the inside of the kais. Now the towel is going to be wet with water or white wine. Now you might come to wring it out in order to clean the towel. And you might accomplish malabain. But by any other liquid, by orange juice or by Pepsi, we're not afraid that those liquids are going to have a cleansing effect on the towel. And since we're not afraid that they will be able to clean the towel, we're not afraid that you're going to wring it out. So according to this pshat in the Magen Avraham, what the Mechaber seems to be saying is, we are afraid that if you get the towel wet with water or with wine, then you might be tempted and you might come to wring the towel out in order to clean it. But if you get the towel wet with anything else, we're not afraid that you're going to wring it out, because wringing it out is not going to clean it. That's the first way that the Magen Avraham learns, and he brings a raya. He brings two rayas, one from Siman Shin Yotes, one from Siman Shin Lamed Daled, that is speaking to a similar case where you're getting something made out of fabric wet. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mishnah Berurah that the truth is, many achrayim say that we don't even have this fear by wine, or because we're not afraid that by wine you're going to wring it out in order to clean it. Or because tsar yesh lahachmir af b'shar mashkin. And the truth is that the Magen Avraham puts this forth as another way of understanding the Mechaber. The first way the Magen Avraham learned, what we quoted in the Mishnah Berurah, was that the fear over here is you might come to wring out the towel in order to clean it. And the prohibition is linked very much to white wine and water, because it's only by those beverages that we have such a fear. But then there's a very different way to learn the Mechaber. And that is that the problem of this sif is not the wine or the water. The problem is the kais. The problem is that we're afraid. When you take a towel and you shtup it, you push it into a kais by definition is relatively narrow. When you go to push the towel inside the kais, you're going to perforce perform schita. Because since you're pushing the towel into a constricted space, you're going to squeeze the towel. And that's why the Mechaber says the point of the Mechaber is not so much the wine or the water. The wine or the water is Ruch de Milsa Nakat. We're talking about, generally speaking, you drank water, you drank wine. That's what your kais is generally speaking wet with in the days of the Mechaber. The Mechaber is saying, don't go ahead and wipe out the inside of a narrow kais, because it's almost a psik that you're going to squeeze the towel in order to insert it and push it into the kais, and therefore there's a chashash, you might come to schita, don't do it. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says now. He says, "Ubekais tsar yesh lahakmir af b'shar mashkin," and therefore by a narrow kais, you taka should be careful, because you might come to schita, and it doesn't matter what liquid you're talking about. Let's go a little bit weiter. Let's see sif nun tes, and then we could ice cut nun tes, and then we can speak about this in a little greater detail. Ice cut nun tes. The Mechaber said you shouldn't wipe out the kais mishum da asil de schita. Says the Mishnah Berurah. The thrust of the Mechaber over here is, we have been learning over here all sorts of shilas that are negeya to getting fabrics wet, right? We spoke at length about shriyasan zuhi kibusan. When you get a fabric wet, it could be that just getting the fabric wet is already kibus. You have one mandiyama that says that that's only true if the beged, if the fabric has dirt on it. You have another mandiyama who's more machmir and says, no, even if the fabric is clean, shriyasan zuhi kibusan. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this sif cotton, this sif yud beis, is coming and following on the heels of that entire discussion. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, Tzayna Loimar. What the Mechaber wants to say over here is, Afilu la paiskim le'el b'sif tes. Even according to the more makel opinion that we learned in sif tes, the law yamrinan bazesh riyasa izeu kibusai. The more lenient opinion that we learned in the Ramah in sif tes, if you would ask a shaila, and you would say, I have a kais. The kais is wet inside. I have a clean towel. Am I allowed to use the clean towel to wipe out the wet kais? Well, the first thing that you have to think about is you're getting a towel wet. A towel, you're getting a fabric towel, you're exposing it to water. Do we say shriyasan zuhi kibusan? Well, according to the more makel opinion, you don't. Because assuming it's a clean towel, we don't say shriyasan zuhi kibusan by a clean towel. On the heels of that comes along the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, "Afilu la paiskim le'el b'sif tes lo yamrina mazeh shriyasan zeu kibusai." Even according to that more makel opinion, that we're not going to apply the rule of shriyasan zui kibusan because we're dealing with a clean towel. Mishum dahamapa hayanaki b'tchila v'lo hayabalichlach v'gam. And even according to the more machmir opinion in sif tes, you also wouldn't say shriyasan zui kibusan. Why? V'gam dekinuach zeh derech lichluchu v'lo derech kibus. When you're using a towel to wipe out a dirty kais, that's derech lichluch. That's not an action that cleans a towel. That's an action that makes a towel dirty. We learned earlier, even according to the more machmir opinion in sif tes, who says that you say shriyasan zui kibusan even by a clean towel, but it's still mutter if you're doing it derech lichluch, and this is derech lichluch. So somebody comes and asks a shaila, can I take a clean towel and wipe out a kais? So you'll start thinking, okay, let's see. Shriyasan zui kibusan. Well, according to the first man yamar, you don't say shriyasan zui kibusan because the towel is clean. Oh, but there's a more machmir second opinion. Well, even according to the more machmir second opinion, this is derech lichluch. So far, we're coming up that everything is mutter. Says the Mechaber, no. Hafilu hachi aser. Over here, it would still be aser. Why? Mishum sheviyavali de schita. Because we have a new problem. Schita. And the truth is that we discussed this in sif tes also. Even in sif tes, when the Ramah brought down the more makel opinion, that holds that you don't say shriyasan zui kibusan by a clean towel, but still in all, what did the Ramah say? You're still not allowed to put mayim merubim on the towel. You're not allowed to expose even a clean towel to a lot of water. Why? Because if you get it very wet, then we're going to worry about schita. This is similar. Over here, you're right. We're not going to say shriyasan zui kibusan because it's a clean towel and because it's derech lichluch. But there's a new problem. The problem is you're stupping a towel inside a narrow kais. You're forcing it into the kais. You might come to schita. Okay, now, halakha l'maisa, practical. What do we do with this? So, continues the Mishnah Berurah. B'tshuvas Radvaz, Siman Yud Gimel, and the Radvaz, it is Tshuvas, it's Siman Yud Gimel, Kosavi writes, Le'inyan niguv kaisu ka'ara, when it comes to drying cups, glasses, and plates, says the Radvaz, the ha'olam ein nizharin bazeh. The Welt is not careful about this. The Welt is not careful not to dry out plates and kaisais. And says the Radvaz, uledina ein lachush. And halakha l'maisa, you don't have to be concerned. And he gives a very, very solid reason, the Radvaz. De'ein davuk b'dafne akli mayim kol kach sheyavel l'deschita. When's the last time you dried out a glass and you got the towel so wet that you would be able, even if you wanted to wring out the towel? You don't get the towel so wet when you dry out a kais. Eliam came in agava kalim harbe, unless you're drying lots of kalim. Does karav adavar sheyavel l'deschita bein kli l'kli. If you're it's Motzi Pesach, and you're putting away all the Pesach dishes, and you're drying who knows how many dishes, then the towel gets very wet. So yeah, maybe it's Friday, it was Friday night, you had a massive Suda, you had 40 people over, and you have to dry out lots of glasses and lots of plates. Maybe then it's possible that the towel will get so wet that you could come to Schita. So then, Roy Ligaboy Shaloyasake, Nayin Sham. So yeah, if you're doing a lot of Kalim, Taka, then there's room to object to people and say, don't dry out so many kalim with one towel. There's a chashash you might come to schita. And the Birkei Yosef brings this opinion of the Radvaz. But when you're dealing with a rag that is a dish towel, something that's miyuchid for this purpose, she'ein makbid alav l'sachtoi, then you're not even makbid to go ahead and squeeze it out. You don't care if it gets wet. It's supposed to get wet. L'kulei al mashari. The Nira, and the Chavetz Chaim concludes, he says that it would seem that even to dry out a lot of towels is a mutter. Again, the Chavetz Chaim says you're not really going to come to schita. The towel gets very wet on one side, that it's not doing a good job of drying off the kalim. You'll flip the towel over, and you'll use the other side. And let's do Mishnah Berurah's Katan Samach. Dasil de Schita Ayin Ba'achronim Shasasmu. The Achronim conclude the B'kaishu Tzar. If it comes to a very narrow case, Taka Ein L'Nagva Efilu B'Smarto T'Byuchad L'Kach. It would be better not to dry it even with a dedicated towel. Di Efsher Shelo Yavali de Schita, because if it's Taka a very narrow case, it's very possible you're going to come to schita. Avadavar rachov, but something that's wide and open, you want to dry off the table, you want to dry off a bench, you want to dry off your countertops. You certainly could dry it with something that you wouldn't be makbid to squeeze out. Now, when he sends you to the Biur Halacha, he's sending you to Biur Halacha Dibur HaMaschil Mishum, which is a very lengthy, very detailed Biur Halacha. I'm not going to go through the entire Biur Halacha, but all the way at the end of this Biur Halacha, the Chavetz Chaim writes, Al Kain Nireh, therefore it would seem, the B'shas Hatchak for sure, Ein Limchais Biadamekel L'Nagiv B'Kais Tzar, even to dry out a narrow kais in a Shas Hatchak, you shouldn't object to somebody who dries it out. But you should make sure to use something that you wouldn't be makbid to wring out. And shake out the water that's in the kais before you do it, so that there should only be a little moisture left in the kais, and then we definitely don't have to be concerned that you might come to schita. Let's move along to Sif Yud Gimel, and let's conclude this beautiful, beautiful Siman Shid Beis. Says the Mechaber Sif Yud Gimel, a very interesting halacha. Apparently, back in the day, they had a very, very useful tool. They had kind of like a Swiss Army knife, a combination mirror and trimming tool. So it was a metal mirror that had a very, very sharp edge. And what people would do with it is, they would look in the mirror, and when they would see some errant hairs, so they look in the mirror, they see some hairs that are, out of place, they would take the mirror right away, and they could use it to trim and snip some errant hairs. So, therefore, says the Mechaber Sif Yud Gimel, Ein mistaklin b'Shabbos b'marish al matchis. You cannot look in a metal mirror, shehi charifa ki izmel, the type that is sharp like a knife. Pirish kein sakin koton chad v'charif. It was like a very small, very sharp knife. The chayshinon shemeyashaba nimin abedul dolin, because then we have to be concerned you might come to trim off an errant hair. So that's exactly what this was made for. So this was a very nice, shiny, reflective piece of metal. You looked inside, you saw an errant hair, you went snip. Then you took a look again. Did I get it? Okay, good. And therefore you can't look in this on Shabbos, because you might just come to trim off the hair. Says the Mechaber weiter, Va'afilu hi kavua b'kaisel. This would be true even if this mirror was hanging on the wall. And since it's hanging on the wall, you're not going to take it off the wall to trim off of here. You still can't do it. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, you know why? Because once they made the gzera that you're not allowed to do this, they made a loy plug. Once they said you're not allowed to look in such a type of a mirror, you can't do it whether it's handheld or whether it's on the wall. But it's not, we're not asering using a mirror. It's mutter to look in a mirror that doesn't have this problem. In other words, it's a mirror that doesn't have a sharp edge. It's not the type of mirror that you would use for trimming. So then it's mutter. Afilu eina kavua, even if it's not on the wall. In other words, you have a handheld mirror that doesn't have that sharp edge. It's not a trimming mirror. So then it's mutter to use it. It's just this trimming mirror that you're not allowed to use. Back to Peites Amud Beis, says the Mishnah Berurah Samach Aleph, Shi Charifa. This is a mirror that had a sharp edge. Ritzayin Loymar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, Shesfas Hamara Chada. The edge of this mirror was very sharp. V'asuya l'shem kach. This is what it was made for. It's not pshat that this is a mirror that just happens to have a sharp edge. No, this is what it was made for. It's a trimming mirror. It was made to trim off those errant hanging hairs during the week when you look inside and you see a hanging hair. Meduldolin means hanging. And therefore there's room to be concerned on Shabbos that you might forget yourself and you might do what you would normally do during the week. Very simple to understand concern. The Mechaber said this is osir, even if it's kfuah b'kaisel, even if this mirror is attached to the wall. Since it's attached to the wall, you can't use it as a trimmer. Right? It's affixed to the wall, so you're not going to use it for a trimmer. Gam ken osir, it's still osir. Why? Once the Chachamim said you're not allowed to use that metal mirror, so that's it. You're not allowed to use the metal mirror. I don't care if it's built onto the wall. You're still not allowed to use it. The gzera was on the metal mirror. That's it. But if you have a mirror that doesn't have this concern, then it's okay. Kigoin, for example, explains the Chavetz Chaim, like a glass mirror, the type that we use. Those are not used to trim off hairs. Or a metal mirror, but it's not sharp. And it wasn't made sharp. Not that it's a dull trimming mirror. No, it's not a trimming mirror. It's a metal mirror with thick edges. It was never meant for this. And the reason why the Gzera doesn't apply is, since it's not made to cut off hairs, like Gazer Klala, they never made a Gzera on such a mirror. And he makes a very good point there, the Chavetz Chaim. We're not concerned. Shema, maybe you'll look in the mirror, right? A glass mirror that's not made for trimming. You'll look in the mirror, you'll see hanging hairs. You'll go to the kitchen, you'll open the drawer, you'll take out a scissor, and you'll snip your hair. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that we're not choishish for. We're not worried. Maybe when you look in the mirror, you'll see that there are hanging hairs. You'll run to go get a scissor to do a trim. Because you'll remember that it's Shabbos. By the trimming mirror, we're afraid that what you're going to do is, you're going to look, see a hanging hair, and go snip. We're not afraid with a regular mirror, you're going to look, oh, I got some hairs hanging over here. Let me go get a scissor. Where did I put the scissor? Get up, go to the kitchen, start rummaging through the drawers, find a scissor, go back to the mirror to watch what you're doing. No. But by Benkach, you're going to remember that it's Shabbos. Finally, says the Mishnah Berurah on a mirror that doesn't have this chashash is there, and now says the Mishnah Berurah, Ayin b'Yeridea Siman Kufdun Vav Sif Beis. Take a look in Yeridea in Siman Kufdun Vav Sif Beis. Be'eza oifen mutter lihistakel b'mara. When is it mutter to look in a mirror? There was a concern with looking in a mirror, that looking in a mirror has a certain aspect of leisilbash. That is doing something that typically women did. This was something women looked in mirrors to beautify themselves, to apply their cosmetics, etc., etc. This was a female way of doing things, not a male way of doing things. It was included perhaps in the rubric of lois silbash, that you don't dress the way a woman dresses, you don't comport yourself the way a woman comports herself, and therefore there was a halachic concern that had to be dealt with. When is it mutter for a man to use a mirror? One of the things that it says over there is, in a day and age when men always use mirrors, when it became that a mirror is no longer the domain of a woman, a mirror is used equally by men and equally by women, so then you can't apply any kind of issur of leisobash. You can't look at a mirror and say, oh, that's a woman thing to do. No, men use mirrors all the time, and therefore the Ramah says it is mutter for a man to use a mirror. Okay, wow. Hadran Alach Siman Shin Beis. I tell you, Siman Shin Aleph, Siman Shin Beis, these are the types of simanim that separate the men from the boys. So thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua's refuahs, parnasah, sheduchim, to all in need. We should be zoicha to learn the rest of Chelik Gimel together and weiter, and we should be zoicha to see the Bias Kol Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.